Focus.
Sorry, I just realized I hadn't
Okay.
started recording. I cannot post this to YouTube unless I'm recording.
Okay.
Just a little tip for everybody.
Tonight's focus is on texture. We're creating texture in our palm tree, our sand, the waves of the sea. So we would paint in our C-shaped sand around here, and then we paint the sea starting from the horizon coming forward, and our tree with the leaves is the last. So that is the steps to tonight's painting. Like to start by first thanking everybody that has joined and has signed up, and all of those of you that are in person there at the American Fork Library. I'm so glad to have this time to spend with you. So we have a few tools that we're using tonight other than our paintbrushes. We have a wider paintbrush, a round paintbrush. You're going to be using a palette knife. Let me move it. Palette knife, which is a plastic, or perhaps those of you online might have a metal one. So this is a palette knife. This will give us our waves and our clouds in the sky. And then really special tonight is we're going to learn to paint palm trees with a kind of brush that's called a fan brush. So it's a brush that flares out like a fan. So those are our tools for tonight. So to start with, we're going to start with our Cerulean Blue, which should be the light sky blue that you have. I have put some on my styrofoam plate palette here. So I have sky blue or cerulean blue and white. And whenever you're using your palette knife, you want to use it and make sure you wipe it off before you use it again. So I'm going to start with the cerulean blue, and I'm using my palette knife like a little spoon to scoop up some of the blue, and I'm going to put it up here in the top. Okay, then I'm going to wipe my palette knife off. I don't want the blue on it anymore, so I need to take paper towel and wipe it off. Then I'm going to scoop up some white, which is hard to see here, and I'm going to put that above my tape. And then wipe my palette knife off. And you could set your palette knife away. Then I'm going to be using my my widest flat brush that I have. Okay, and you're going to hold the brush like you would hold a pencil, but you're going to hold it up here in the middle of your handle. That is so that you can get this motion going. Back and forth, back and forth.
Hey, Lori. I think we have some questions.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. I ran out to get paper towels and was not here for a couple minutes. And people are still trying to catch up. So sorry. I've got paper towels now.
Okay.
Somehow I did not have paper.
Because that's one of the things she's going to teach us tonight for the
Oh, I don't know that that was on the list. So people with kids at home do not have fan brushes, but I have some here that I can run up and get for people who are in person.
Oh, okay. We will, they can do it with regular brushes too. Just that is something that we use with this one.
Okay. Here are paper towels. If you guys want to pass them down the row, I apologize if they're not in here. I thought I was so prepared tonight, you guys. Is that hilarious? I'm gonna run upstairs and get fan brushes too. Then
They're at the very last thing we do, so don't worry.
Good.
Yeah.
So
Run up when they're working on their sky or something.
all right. Anything else we're missing that I missed? Nugget in the kids, everybody good? Okay. I'll run up and get, yes, ma'am.
Do they have palette knives?
They all do have palette knives, yes.
Cerulean blue, like a little spoon with your palette knife. Put a few drops. Acrylic paint dries fast, so you're going to take, because it's the first time we used our brush, we're going to take and dip it in our water, tap it off on the side, which will just make our paint flow better. And now remember, holding the brush loosely halfway up the handle, I'm going to go forward and back, and forward and back. And you're putting that blue on. Make sure you go all the way to the edge and all the way to each side. And you're keeping this motion of going forward with the brush and then backwards. So to the right, to the left, to the right, to the left, back and forth across your canvas. You can dip your brush in more blue because you're probably going to need more blue than the dots you put on. Okay. Sky is always darkest at the top and gets lighter as it comes to the horizon during the daytime. And so using the same motion, going back and forth, now I'm going to start mixing in my white paint. And I want to go don't go past the tape. Just make sure you take it all the way down to the tape line. So you're going to end up with a very soft gradation from the darkest up here, the top, mixing it to your white. I get this up so you can see how that's blended. If you want to see if it's blended nicely so you don't just have a blue line and a white line, hold it out at arm's reach and squint your eyes at it till you just see the value change from the blue to the white. Yes, so right. How's everybody doing, Wendy? So you can go back and pick up more blue to get it a little darker at the top if it isn't. I put a little bit more white on my brush just to bring that in. Where you see this dark blue on mine, that is actually on my tape. So be aware of where your tape is and keep your paint above your tape. It's okay to paint over the tape. I mean on the tape, but not over it, not to the bottom. If any of you that are virtual, Christy, Kelly, Talon, Kevin, Tiffany, if you want to turn on your video and show me where you're at, that is helpful. You don't have to keep it on all the time, but it's helpful to me to see pacing wise how we're doing or how everybody's doing. Good. That looks really good. Nice variation then. So we're going to use the same brush, but we're going to clean it a little bit in water. So put it in your water and slush it around a little bit. Tap it off on the side and pat it off with a paper towel. Okay, make it my you're the next step at the second. Okay, so you dry it off so you get that water. You don't want a lot of water on your tape. The water on your brush will make your paint transparent, so you don't want that. So in your paint, in your list of paints, you should have had a violet or a purple color. So I'm going to take just a little bit of purple and I'm going to put it in this bottom right corner. Okay, little bit of purple on my paintbrush, bottom right corner. And I'm just streaking that out to the middle of my painting. Now take your brush without dipping it in the water, wipe it with a paper towel. And now you're going to pick up some white on your brush. Okay. Did you grab the brush? Okay. And with white on my brush, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to blend it in with my lavender, with my purple. So I've mixed my white with the lavender. It's coming from the bottom of the horizon. It's coming from the bottom right corner. And as you can see on my painting, it looks, there's too much of a stripe there. It doesn't vary like it should. So I'm going to take my brush and I'm just going to wipe the white off of my brush. And taking my brush now with no paint on it. I haven't cleaned my brush, but it's white. It still has a little white in it. And I'm just gently stroking that where I kind of had a line there where my lavender and the white were meeting the blue. And I'm going to blend that in so I get a nice little variation there. Just a little gradation from lavender on the horizon to blue. Okay, so we are done with our large brush now. So now we do want to clean it. So back to our water, swish it a little bit. We will use it later, but we'll get the lavender and the white out of it. Wipe it. And then set that brush aside. So we've done the cerulean blue from the sky down, blended in with the white to the horizon. We added in some violet in the right corner and then pulled that violet into the center and then mixed a little white with it just to give us that soft gradation. And that is our background color for our sky. And we've washed our large brush and set it aside. Now we're going to pick up our palette knife. Palette knives come a lot of different sizes. This is like a little diamond one. There are ones that are long and narrow. There are ones that are kind of rounded. The thing with palette knives is we are picking up paint on the bottom of the palette knife. Here's the top, here's the bottom. Okay. And instead of holding our palette knife, I'll do this against the blue. Let your sky dry a minute. Instead of holding our palette knife like a paintbrush, like we would be holding a paintbrush, I want you to take your palette knife, turn your hand over, and put your palette knife in the center of your hand. Then you hold on to your palette knife and turn your hand over so that your index finger is on the top. And I can push with my finger, add pressure. So see my handle of my palette knife? We're gripping it like you would a bicycle handlebar. Okay, I'm gripping it like this, not like a pencil, but I'm putting my hand over the top and holding onto it, putting my finger on the end of it.
Everybody doing okay?
Mhm. You can take your acrylic paint does dry fast, but you can take your painting and fan it a little bit to get that lavender close to the horizon a little bit drier. If you look at your painting in the light and it's shiny, that means it's still wet. When it loses that shine on it, then it's tacky and start and drying. So you can just take it. It doesn't take long for it to dry. So now we're going to make these. If you look here on the painting, over here on the main painting, you see these little, I've been too long out of teaching school. Stratus clouds, are they? The little streaky ones close to the horizon. Here, this is what we're going to do with our palette knife. So these two little white ones are birds. We had those at the very end, but these little streaky line clouds. So I'm going to take my palette knife. This is so hard because it's white paint, but I'm going to take my white paint. I'm going to set my palette knife in my white paint. So I'm just getting paint on the back side, kind of the back edge of it. And with the paint on the back, see, there's my palette knife. So my paint is on the bottom. I'm going to come in from the side with kind of my stroke is like this, like I'm skipping across the water. So I'm going to come in here with my white, and I'm going to kind of lay my palette knife down and just kind of streak. And you see how I'm getting those streaky clouds? That's good. It doesn't take much. We just want a few little clouds there. So maybe 1 or 2 times with a little white on the back of your palette knife. And I'm going to say that's good for mine. You decide how many of these little clouds towards the horizon you want to put in there. And once you have the clouds on with your palette knife, you're going to wipe your palette knife off with a towel. And the next paint you're going to want is the dark green. Wendy, tell me what, you have a dark green in the kit?
Yes.
Okay, so you're going to put your dark green onto your palette, your paint palette. And you can use your round brush for this. Since our streaky clouds were kind of over here on the right side of our painting, we're going to be working now, look at the finished painting, we're going to be working now on our land that you can see here in the back on the horizon. So we should be painting on dry canvas. So you can look at it in the light, you can tap it with your finger, make sure that your canvas is dry there where you're going to put the land. Okay, so picking up your dark green, you're going to come in here and make, this is really important for you to see where the edge of your tape is. Okay, so go above your tape about a half an inch. And you're going to paint a line that comes and then drops down onto your tape. So we just use a gray handle here. So the edge of my tape is right here. Okay, this down here is tape. So I'm gonna go about a half an inch above my tape, the top of my tape, and I'm gonna paint with the dark green a little land sticking out, and then it's gonna get closer to the horizon the farther out I go. I'll make mine go a little farther. And then I'm just going to go with my green, and I'm just going to fill that in solid. Sponges. I have my grandson here from California, 11-year-old that's painting here with me. We love to do art together. He lives in California and I live in Montana, and most of the time on Sunday afternoons we'll do a drawing lesson, usually from the art hub. He shares his phone with me and we draw together or paint together. But I'm lucky the boys have been here for, him and his 17-year-old brother been here for a week. So that was Grandma's, it was Nathan's birthday present. He wanted to come and see Grandma and Grandpa and be here on the place in Montana, where he's been a big help, him and his brother doing lots of farm work. So as you can see, it does not look good now. So don't worry about it. We've just blocked in about a half an inch above our horizon. Water, dry it with the paper towel, and you're going to set this brush aside. Wendy, what kind of sponge or peanuts or foam did you put in the kit?
I ended up finding a package of big yellow sponges like the ones I showed you. So everybody has a whole one, has a whole painting sponge.
Okay, so you're gonna, the next we're gonna start with our first texture. And we're
Want to see what ours looks like?
You have a little sponge. So what Nathan and I are painting it with here is a packing peanut, a little styrofoam packing peanut. Okay.
This is what we all have, Lori. I don't know if you can see anywhere. Can you see?
Yeah, good. So I also have this funny little spongy thing. So that can work too. But even with your yellow sponges, Wendy, we're gonna pick them a little bit.
Okay, that's fine.
So you're gonna take here's my packing peanut. I'm gonna take my fingernails and I'm gonna pick the end of it so it's not straight. I'm gonna pick out some of the sponge pieces. See how I picked out some little sponge pieces like this? So I just tore out some little sponge pieces. And this is going to become my paintbrush for now. Okay, so everybody's getting their sponges ready. So you also have a yellow and a yellow ochre. Yellow ochre is like a gold color. Oops. This is yellow. Here. I call yellow ochre is like a mustard color. So you have like a brighter yellow, and you have a yellow ochre, which is like the little mustard color. Okay?
The bright one is the dark
Yellow.
yellow, and the darker one is the ochre.
Yeah. Ochre looks more like a Dijon mustard, where the other looks like yellow mustard. Now we also want to have a little light green spot. So I'm going to take some white with my round brush. I have some white, and I'm gonna give myself a little spot of, let me get that, white there, and I'm gonna add a little bit of green to it. And I want to get a light green. So you have a light green, we have a dark yellow, and we have a yellow ochre. So wash your brush that you used for mixing your light green and set it aside. And now using your sponge, we're gonna start your green land should be pretty much dry by now. So take a look at it. If it isn't, fan it a little bit. And then we will take our, whatever you're using, even with your yellow sponges, you should have found a little part where you could pick it off. We're gonna start with the light green, and you're gonna pounce your sponge in the light green. Then come over to your land, and your little bushes can go, we're just adding a little bit of foliage on here. The little bushes can go above the land line there at the top, you know. Okay. So I put a little light green on there. See how it looks, how you've added the texture of some seagrass on there? And I'm going to take my little sponge and I'm going to pat it off on a paper towel just to get some of the green off. And then I'm going to go to my yellow ochre, which is the Dijon mustard color. Pat my sponge in the yellow, in the yellow ochre. You don't want to glob it on, so pat a few times on a paper towel, and then come to your island or land here and add a little bit of yellow ochre sponge parts. So first we painted our land with, first we painted it with the dark green, then we added a little light green on it. Now we're adding a little yellow ochre. And the last one, the highlight that we're going to put on it, is the yellow, which is, we'll say, the French's mustard color. So I'm using the same principle. I'm taking my little sponge, I'm dipping it in the yellow, pat it off a little bit on your palette so it's not super globby, and then come back here on your land and add a few little highlights.
How we doing? Everybody keeping up?
We're just giving a little bit of texture here on the land. Did you do a little of the light? Do you want to do that? Okay, how's everybody doing with their land? Add a little texture on that block of land back there. How are my virtual painters doing? Good, good, Tiffany, good. Okay. Now pick up your palette knife and using the tip, remember again, we're holding it like a handlebar. We're holding onto it like this, putting our finger on top. We are using the tip of it. We're going to use the yellow ochre and we're going to put some rocks close. This will be the sand and the water line right here. So we're gonna lay in a little bit of looks like the face of a rock. So I'm going to take my palette knife with the yellow ochre. So here is the top of my palette knife. Here's the bottom of my palette knife. See, the paint is on the bottom. And go here to your land. This is like Bob Ross, and wherever in your little world you want to put a rock, you're just going to lay your knife down and give a flat color. Keeping in mind where the top of your tape is. You don't want to make these amazing rocks here and then pull your tape off and find they were painted only on your tape, not on your land. So we make a little bit of a rock edge there. And then remembering to wipe your palette knife when you're done. Now, by the time we finish our land over here, our clouds should be dry. So our next step is going to be to use our white and our yellow ochre to make our sand. So if you look at the finished painting here, you see the sand is like in a kind of an elongated C shape. So on your palette, make sure you have a good spot of yellow ochre and that you have your white. Okay, we're gonna go back to our largest brush that we used when we were painting the sky. And this is what we're going to be using for our sand, to get the paint on the area where we want our sand. Okay. So before we start our sand, then you're painting to get those rocks in the land a little drier. Okay. Wendy, how are we doing on pacing with the group that's in person there?
Sorry, I was muted.
I can't hear you.
We're good.
Okay.
I forgot I muted myself. I ask every once in a while to make sure everybody's doing okay.
That's okay. Good. Okay, we're going to remove our horizontal tape line. So grab the edge of your tape. And you're going to carefully peel it off. So now we have a little straight line here right at our horizon where the sky meets the water, where the land is going to meet the beach and the water edge. And I'm going to pick up my yellow ochre, and I am picking up quite a glob of it, quite a big piece. This will be this brush, huh? And I'm going to start up here by the land, and I'm going to make a C shape. Okay, I'm going to put a little more around here. Be careful of your horizon line there. You don't want to go up into your land. You want to keep it down here, down below it. So I painted my yellow ochre on. Without washing my brush out, I'm going to pick up white. And I'm going to go over that with my white. I'm actually going to be blending the white right on top of the canvas. No, you don't clean up. You just squeeze into the white. Like that. It can be streaky. It can be streaky. You don't need to fill it in straight. But while it is still on there, you have to work quickly. Just set that brush down for a minute. You're going to do your next texture of the sand by taking your palette knife and bouncing it on your paint. Okay, so you're going to just bounce your palette knife on your paint to give it the texture of sand. It will also blend your white and your yellow ochre. You feel like it's a little too dark, which I think mine is, I'm going to put a little more white in it. I just put it on the bottom of my backside of my palette knife. Okay, you should be able, if you don't have enough paint, put more paint on. You can just scoop it up with your palette knife. Mine is definitely dark enough, so I'm scooping up white. And I'm just pouncing it up and down, up and down. That will give my sand a little bit of texture. I guess I was a little crazy with the yellow ochre because it is quite dark. So I'm adding quite a bit of white on top of it. And instead of streaking it like this is how we did the sky. We took our palette knife, we went like this. Now on our sand, we are just pouncing it up and down, up and down. Huh? And you've taken your sand, so it starts up here at your island, makes a C and goes all the way down to the bottom right corner. And the sand is going to take a little longer to dry just because we've got a little thicker, I got a little thicker paint on it as far as the thickness of the paint on it. This is light and it's hard to see. Hard to see that. Okay, when you're done adding your texture to your sand, you need to wipe off your palette knife. And since we were in a hurry, I need to go back and wash off my large brush that has the white and yellow ochre on it. Okay, so we've got our nice sky in there with our streaked clouds. We've done our landmass with a little bit of texture from the sponge, little seagrass, and now we've added our yellow ochre and our white for our sand in the shape of like a stretched out C, and then pounced it with our palette knife to give it a little texture. Now we're going to let this dry. Be very careful to not get your arm in it or your hand in it. And we're going to come back up here with our large brush. And we're going to pick up Ultramarine Blue, which is the very purplish dark blue that you should have. And we're going to do our C now. So the water, if you look at the finished picture here, the water at the horizon is this very deep, dark blue. And then as it comes forward to us, the water lightens up. So we're going to do our ultramarine blue here, right along the edge. And we're going to use our flat brush because we want to try as hard as possible to keep that line straight. We have a guide from where the tape was, so we want to try to keep that straight, the horizon there. And we'll put some blue on that. Then we're going to mix in some of the sky blue that we had, the cerulean blue, little bit of white, and we're going to end up with a little bit of yellow right at the edge. Okay? So taking our flat brush and our ultramarine blue, putting that on the end of your brush, so I'm going to try here with my brush, and I'm going to add that dark blue right along that horizon line. So whenever I'm painting and I'm having to be more precise, I'm right-handed, so I'm holding my paintbrush like this, but you see how I got my little English T finger out? I like to lay that on my canvas to give me a something to brace. And I'm using my index finger and my thumb to move my brush. So that way I can kind of keep it straight. And I'm going to take it all the way to the edge. And once I have that done right along the edge, here I am going against my land. Then I can add a little more blue on my brush. Now I can add a little more blue. And I can bring that blue a little bit farther, a little bit closer to me, right? For perspective, it's the water's coming closer to me. I'm standing on the beach and the water is coming in like this. Okay, and without cleaning my brush, I'm going to pick up some of my cerulean blue that I had in my sky. And I'm going to mix these two together. I'm using the same kind of motion that I used when I painted my sky. My brush, I'm holding it kind of loosely, about halfway up on the handle, so that I can go forward and back, forward and back. And while this paint is still a little wet, I'm going to add a little white on my brush. I'm not washing my brush in between. Okay, I'm bringing that color in. And then I've got a hard chunk of paint, which is not good. In Fortnite, you might like to get skins. In paint, you do not want paint skins. So if you have some paint that's drying and when you go to pick it up, it's got a skin on it, you got to get rid of that. That's not a good thing. And I'm also going to pick up a little green, a little white, and I'm going to start adding a little green. So here's what I'm doing. I'm picking up white and a little green on my brush. Got a little white, little green on my brush. Now I'm adding that in, which is gonna mix with the blue and give me a little kind of turquoise. So again, it's a little white, little green. So I have here my ultramarine blue, my cerulean blue, paint blob, a little green, a little white. When I look at mine, I'm seeing too much of a change from the dark to the lighter. So that means I need to add some more middle tone, which was my blue from the sky. I might need to put on a little more darker blue. It is a little hard with acrylic paint because it dries so fast. You do want it to blend. You want it to have enough paint there that you can blend some. And this will be our undertone of our paint because we're going to use our white with our palette knife to give us the waves. I'm going to clean my brush now because I'm done with my watercolor for now. The color of my water, not watercolor paint, water. I'm going to wash my big brush and dry it. Set it aside. And I want to pick up my round brush. I'm going to mix a very light yellow ochre. So I'm using white paint with a little bit of yellow ochre in it. This is going to be the edge of my sand that it's the sand that appears as the wave comes in and then the tide pulls it back out. So it's kind of like you're looking through some water to your. So I've got a light ochre here. And I'm going to just come up here and I'm just going to kind of, using my brush kind of zigzaggy, I'm going back and forth. I'm just making this sand that goes right along my water. And zigzaggy right along the edge of the water. And take that all the way down to this is
Hey, Lori.
this is blending your where the water and the sand are coming together.
Hey, Lori.
Yes.
I have a couple people a little bit behind. So will you just talk about that whole last step of blending the
Yes.
ochre
Yeah.
and the white for the.
And a lot of my sand is still wet, so you need to be kind of careful with that because remember we added so much texture on holding my canvas just here by the edge when I'm holding it up. But you are, so when the water comes up to the beach and then the tide pulls it back, you're kind of looking through water, and we're here, look at the finished painting. We're actually going to add the little white ripples right along the edge, the foam and stuff. But there is that little spot where the water comes up and the tide pulls it back, and you're almost looking through the water and you're seeing the sand. And so that's why we want to mix our white with a little yellow ochre. So I have a light value of yellow ochre. And then I'm using my round brush. And then I am going up here where my sea was, that first sea that I made. And I'm going to use little zigzag strokes with my round brush. And I'm just going to put that sand in that the water is just kind of going over.
And that little area of smooth sand where it's been washed
Uh-huh.
back out.
And I want to take
Yeah,
that.
white and yellow ochre mixed together just to smooth
Yeah,
it
so
out
you have
right
a
there.
light one. And you just want to take it all the way down to the bottom right corner. So you've now got paint on all of your canvas. There isn't any place on your canvas that doesn't have some paint on it. And we're more than halfway done. So now's the time to take a breath. Don't grip your paint. Take a deep breath. This is a calming painting. My grandchildren know how much I love Zen and the calmness. And so I just had a birthday the end of May, and I got a beautiful Himalayan salt rock lamp, which it adds a lot of calmness to the room. And then my grandsons that are visiting right now, Nathan and Noah, they got me a little Zen water. So it has a little glass ball at the top of it, and the water trickles down, and you plug it in, and it's so peaceful. So if you can picture that in your mind, take a deep breath. The water, we've covered all of our canvas now with some kind of paint. If you want to check how you're doing, you pick up your painting and hold it at arm's reach and squint your eyes at it. You should see a nice variation of values in your sky with your clouds. You should see the depth of your ocean, your sea there gets much darker farther out. You might be able to still see a little texture in your sand. So we're still leaving our sand to dry if it hasn't yet. And now that I've done the edge of the sand here, I'm going to wash my round brush. Top it off. Dry it with the paper towel. The next time we use this, it will be, guess what? For the trunk of the palm trees. So, back to your favorite palette knife. Woohoo! Yeah. Okay, so we have our palette knife. Our job right now, looking at the finished painting, is to start adding in the crests of the waves, the foam on the top, the foam that forms along the edge where the water and the sand have met, and the crest of the waves as they are rolling in. Okay, far out in the distance, there's any white. That's what perspective towards us. We're going to add some little white for the waves cresting in the way you knife. I've grabbed a hold of it like a handlebar, finger on top. I have a mess on my palette, so I need to clean it here a little bit. No, pure white. So we want pure white. So if you have paint on my and even before you on your palette knife, let's practice a little bit what a wave stroke is going to be. I'm going to fan my painting just a little bit here to make sure my colors are dry. Give everybody a chance to get together here. So when I look at my beach, remember, was that elongated C shape. I'm going to say the point of my beach, or the, yeah, point of my beach, where you're standing, is going to be right about here, where my index finger is. Which means my waves are not going to come horizontally into this front side. Okay, think of the motion of your waves. I don't have any paint on my palette. I just want you to get the idea right now. So here's our horizon line, but this is the point of our beach right here. So my waves are going to come in at an angle till they come right to this point edge, okay? So what am I saying? I'm saying the front of my beach is here, not down here, okay? So when I have a little white on the back edge of my palette knife, I'm going to say on the back right edge of my palette knife, I'm going to put white. I'm going to come in about halfway here, and I'm going to be using a stroke, just like a curled wave, that kind of a rolling stroke. Remember in our clouds, we did straight this. I'm going to come in here with a little bit of a rolling stroke, kind of a spiral. So I'm taking my paint, and here, if I use this palette knife, you can see it better. And I'm going to tip it so that I have paint on the edge, the back edge of my palette knife. There's the bottom of my palette knife. There's the top. Okay. I'm going to first come in here about halfway down on the right side, and I'm going to do these little so here's my first wave coming in. Okay. And then I'm just going to build on that by getting a little white on the bottom of my palette knife. And they're spaced apart, you know how a wave is. And I'm going to come in here with my next one. It is hard with a palette knife to figure out where do I put my paint and how hard do I press. Now these ones that are up here, they're going to be a little bit thicker. So here's my waves coming in. Notice how they're kind of a diagonal. And as they come in closer to so there's a space between them, but as they get closer to the beach, there's going to be less space. The waves are going to be closer together. Don't forget to add a little bit back here in this edge. You would still see some coming back over there. After you have a few waves that look like they're coming in, rolling into the front of the beach, you're going to take your palette knife now, and you're going to add the foam right around the edge. So picking up the white just on the tip of your palette knife, you're going to come along here and add the foam that's there's going to be quite a bit of white here along your edge. So I'm just picking up paint with on the tip of the bottom tip of my palette knife. I'm still doing the little kind of C rolling shape, but I'm also kind of pouncing my palette knife just to give it that foam as it's coming right up to the edge of the sand. And then the last thing with, if you've been to the ocean and you've seen the waves come in and then go back out, they often leave a little bit of foam up on the sand. So now I'm going to take with paint on the back edge of my palette knife, and I'm actually going to go out here in the sand area and add just a little bit of that white leftover foam from the last wave. So if I hold that up, can you see that? So you have that little bit of white foam that was left from the last wave that came in and then pulled it out. We have a little of the white foam right there at the edge. And then we've added with our palette knife little squiggles of white foam left on the sand beach. That is going to finish our water. And so you can wipe off your palette knife. I put way too much soap there. Okay. Okay, how we doing for timing, Wendy?
I think I have an
Good.
advanced class here in person. They're doing amazing. Everybody's
Good.
keeping up.
How about you that are doing it virtual? Show me your picture and see where you're at. Just take a minute. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, nice. Very nice, Christy. Nice. I'm going to fan mine a little bit while we just wait for everybody to be together here. Because our next, actually, we're going to do it up here, so we'll be good. Okay.
Anybody need anything?
We have two palm trees on our painting. If you look at our finished painting, you see that we see things that are up close to us are going to be larger, things that are farther away are smaller. For example, on our painting here, we have a palm tree with a few coconuts. Well, the coconut, the leaves of the palm tree look like they're larger than the land. But of course, we know that's not true. But that gives us the perspective that the palm tree is closer to the viewer and the land is farther away. So if you look up here in the corner, we're going to add just a few little palm leaves that will give you the impression that there is if there was no edge right here, you would see the other trunk of another palm tree right out here. Okay, so we are going to start with that. And for Wendy, did they get the fan brushes?
Yes, everybody in person has fan brushes. I'm so sorry for those of you who have kids that they don't have
Okay.
fan brushes in them. Somehow I missed that, but everybody in person does have a fan brush now.
Okay, so we're doing it with the fan brush. You could also do it with the large brush. But what I'm going to do My paint is dry on my palette now. So our,
We do also have a fairly small angle brush, Lori, so they could use that. We don't have,
Yeah.
everybody has
yeah,
a little angle brush that might be easier to do
okay.
than the
The
flat one,
little
because their flat one is
curly
huge.
Okay, here's my palette. It's a mess. Most of my paint, other than my white and a little of the blue, are dry. They're all dry on my palette now. So I need, for our palm leaves, we're using our dark green, a little bit of the, if you have any of the ultramarine, just to get the green a little darker. We are using our yellow ochre and our light green. So let's make sure we have the paint on here. So I have white. Do you have white? Yeah. Okay, you have green.
Are you mixing paint right now, Lori?
Yeah, I'm just putting fresh paint on my palette.
Oh,
because
gotcha.
paint on my palette is dry. So I need some more of the dark green. I have yellow ochre, I have dark green. I need to mix, so use your round brush. Mix some light green. Make a glob of it so you have a little bit of it. And then we're going to paint our palm leaves, the ones in the top right left corner. So I'm going to pick up my fan brush. Okay. I'm going to hold it I'm holding it here like a pencil, but I'm turning it so it's going to be straight up and down, kind of perpendicular. And I'm going to put the edge of my brush in the green. So I've kind of held my brush perpendicular to get green on the edges of it. And I'm going to go up here into my corner, and I'm first going to take my brush and draw like a little line out for a leaf. And then I'm just lightly going to take and pull that paint down, which will give it a really nice palmy look. And so I'm not even having to put more paint yet on here. I'm going to give myself another, you kind of want about three of the palm leaves.
Lori, are
Remember,
you
this
just
is-
using the straight dark green right now?
Yeah,
Okay, that's what I thought.
the straight dark green. And we're just giving, remember, we're just giving the illusion here of another palm tree. This is all we're going to see of it up here in the corner.
You guys will want to do yours all the way to the corner because you don't have tape around all of your
Right,
edges.
I have, yeah, you can't see, this is the edge of my tape, this last 1/4 inch. So I'm just taking it to my tape, because I'm gonna have a little what you call it, a little frame on it. Okay, so and then I'm going to take, without washing my fan brush, I'm going to take and I'm doing the same thing. I'm holding it straight up and down. I still, if you can see, I still have a little green in it. I'm going to dip my brush into the yellow ochre. So with the palm leaves, I'm working from darkest to lightest. So now I'm going to come back here with my yellow ochre, using those same kind of light brush strokes, and I'm adding a little highlight on my leaves. If I get too much, I can go back with my green. Over a little bit, just tone it down a little bit. And I'm going to call that good for those ones. really have to just comb it. And I would just leave it like that. Okay. Okay, we're gonna have to paint our last thing here, which is going, well, not really, we're gonna paint our palm tree that's in the front here and the shadow. So here we're going to put our trunk in, our leaves, our palm leaves. We're going to add a little shadow here on the sand and our birds. Those are our last remaining steps. So it's going to be a minute before I use my fan brush again for the leaves. So I don't want this paint to dry hard in here. So I'm going to wash my fan brush and dry it. Set it aside and use your round brush. And yeah, you should have just a little bit of burnt umber or dark brown, just because this is like, there's a little bit of burnt umber with our shadow and with the trunk. That's the only brown. So for those of you that are familiar with the color wheel, red, yellow, blue are our primary colors. And all the other colors are mixed from those colors. So red, yellow, blue, primary colors, number one colors, okay? Brown is a mixture of the three primary colors. So if, for example, when I was working with Wendy on this, I had forgot on if you printed off the instructions, I had forgot to put on there, you need a brown, a burnt umber. So if you're stuck and don't have a burnt umber, don't have a brown available, if you take
I didn't hold it against you for forgetting that, since I forgot the fan brushes.
The three, I'll say, so we have blue, yellow, red, primary colors. All together they make brown. Blue and red make purple. Red and yellow make orange. Yellow and blue make green. So you do have a purple, right? Everybody has purple, which is blue and red together. So the only remaining primary color you need to make brown is yellow. Woohoo! You have your dark yellow, not the burnt umber. Well, that would make it kind of a muddy brown. But if you just want to try it, if you have the little bit of your purple, take your purple, which is blue and red, and mix some of your light yellow with it, you will end up with a brown. And if it doesn't look dark enough for you, then that means it needs a little more blue. So you put in a little bit more of the ultramarine blue, and you will end up with a nice brown. So in a pinch, you can always mix the three primary colors to get any color you want. But for us, we are lucky, we have the burnt umber. So I want you to imagine, just take the end of your paintbrush. If you look at the painting here, it's going to start down here in the right corner. Let me see if I get it. Okay, here's the edge here. So it's going to be this very slight curve. So we're going to paint the brown trunk coming up here, and the trunk is going to end out over the water, over the horizon line, and it's going to be up in the sky about an inch and a quarter, okay? So if you think it's going to start here, go here, and it's going to end right about that cloud, okay? So look at your painting and just decide where is that going to end at in my painting. So I'm looking at mine here and I'm gonna have a trunk and it's gonna kind of curve up and then it's gonna kind of curve down and it's gonna end right about here, about 1.5 inches. It's about 1.5 inches, maybe a good inch up here, kind of in the center of my painting, but above my land, okay? And we want it to flow nicely. So we are going to put our brush in water first. Brush in water, tap it on the side, go to your burnt umber, your brown, get burnt umber on your brush, it'll mix with that white, and then roll your brush on the edge of your palette. And then I'm going to put my trunk in. And once I've done it once, now I want to go back and do it again and make it thicker at the bottom and thinner as it gets up to the top. You make it thicker by pressing your paintbrush down harder. Makes it thicker. Lifting the pressure off your paintbrush makes it smaller. I got a funny trunk here that's skinnier in the middle than it is on the end. So I need to press it down and lift it up. And then when I get up here to the top, I want to take my brush, roll it on the side of your palette so it's a point, and I'm just going to give myself some branches, some crazy hair branches here. Not to worry, this is just giving me an idea where I'm going to be putting my palm fronds. So I'm just giving myself some, I say it looks like crazy hair. And when I do this, I'm not setting my little finger down, but I am holding my paintbrush. See the difference between holding your paintbrush like this, like a sketch pencil, and holding it perpendicular? So it's straight up and down on my towards my canvas, like a 90-degree.
And
like
again,
it's
if you don't have your edges taped, you want your trunk to go all the way down to the corner.
Yeah. I'll just do it on my tape here so it looks like I went to the corner.
There you go.
Okay. We want to add just a little highlight to our trunk. Don't do that one yet. Use your little brush, okay, and pick up a little bit of this. So we're going to pick up a little of the yellow ochre. Just on the tip of our brush. I like to roll it off on my plate to get it to be a tip. And I'm just going to add a highlight to the top side of my trunk. So I'm just taking that yellow ochre, putting it along one edge of my trunk just to add a little highlight to it, make it look not quite so. It's okay if it kind of skips along. And palm trees have kind of horizontal little scales on them, you know. So you can go back now with your yellow ochre and you can make some little patterns on your trunk. Again, giving it a little texture, making it so it looks not quite so flat. I was going to say fat because look how fat that is. Okay, While we have our burnt umber on our brush, we're actually going to add our shadow in also. So having your burnt umber on your brush, I would mix it with a little bit of yellow ochre so it's not quite so dark, but the shadow should be darker than the sand. And I'm just going to add a little bit. I'm just kind of sketching this in. I'm not painting it solid. I'm adding a little bit. This would be the shadow coming from my tree up there in the corner on the sand. And then I'm going to have, oh, this is the difference between my burnt umber and my burnt umber and yellow ochre. So I don't want my shadow to be black, which the burnt umber would look really, really dark. So I've lightened it a little bit with yellow ochre. And we're just going to add some shadow here on the sand from my tree. So here I've got like my trunk coming out, and then I'm going to have my tree up here is going to be, this is going to be where the leaves are shadowing, so they're going to be a little thicker. I'm kind of scrubbing this on because my brush is pretty dry of paint, so I can just put it on here and just kind of scrub that shadow in. Okay, so let's go up and finish our palm fronds. You had those 3 in the corner that you practice with. So I've washed off my brush, set it aside, pick up my fan brush. I'm gonna give you just a little bit more. And you'll do the same thing you did with the ones in the corner. You'll first pick up, where's the brush? Your fan brush. Straight up and down, so it's on the tips. Straight up and down, so it's on the tips here. And now I've got these branches that I've put out here. So I'm just going to go to each one, starting here, and put my dark green out. You just want to, with the fan brush, you just want to use a very light touch, because this is the texture that we want for these branches. We want them to be kind of see-through, kind of hairy. Each time I'm just dipping it in my dark. No. And then, not cleaning your brush off, go into your yellow ochre. Add a little bit of that, little bit of highlights where the sunlight is hitting the top of those palm fronds. Going to be a little lighter as it gets out to the edge. You can go right over your water if you have a palm frond that's, you know, would be hanging out. Remember, you're looking at it. This is really up close, this one. So yes, it is going to cover maybe, your water. Maybe it's gonna cover your horizon line a little bit there. You can dip your fan brush in a little of your medium yellow, your brighter yellow, for the final highlights out to the edge. So we kind of move from dark to light. And the last thing with our palm tree here is you're done with your fan brush now, so you can wash it off, dry it. Oh,
Looks like everybody here is still working on their palm fronds.
okay. Does this help if I hold it up so I can see it better?
Maybe. I think they all have it. They're just, you
It's
know,
just kind of a hairy
just
mess.
tinkering. You made it look super easy by just sticking your fan brush on there and going woot, 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 and then it was beautiful. Some of us have to take a minute to, you know. Everybody looks pretty studious about it though. How's everybody doing? Anybody need any extra instruction? Maybe have any questions? Did you highlight the top of it? The nice thing about the trunk is that you can always go back over it with the brown. It's just kind of one brown, you know, line, and then you can adjust as needed, make it look different if you don't love how it looks. It's a top layer. You're not going to mess with anything if you just go right back over it. Everybody online doing okay?
Unmute yourself online or chat with her and tell her if you have a question.
Yep, you can just pop it right in the chat or unmute yourself and ask if you want to. I was just going to say that, Lori. You can do your initials on your painting as though you were just writing them in the sand somewhere.
Right, right.
That's what I did.
Yep. That's always one of the last steps, is to make sure you own it, put your initials or sign your name on it. Do you want to do two in like this?
Micro focus rather than seeing the whole picture.
So let's see, yeah.
Lori, have you been talking your way through painting the birds or no? You just did it.
No,
Okay.
I'll talk to them when they're done. Are they ready?
Yes. Yeah, I
Okay.
think, are you guys ready to move on? I think they're ready because they're asking, are there coconuts?
Coconuts and birds are your last items.
Coconuts and
for
birds.
painting. So you can choose to either paint your coconuts with your round brush, or you can use your palette knife.
Oh, round brush should be way easier.
You're going to have a little yellow ochre and brown. It's going to be just on the bottom of the tip of your palette knife, and you're just going to add some little round shapes here. They're in the center. You just kind of see them poking through the branches. I'm going
The brown and the yellow ochre.
Since I have this blue plastic tablecloth on here, I'm going to show you how to paint the birds on the tablecloth so you can see it big. Let me see that, Nathan.
You're distracted from your waves by your palm fronds.
Okay, are we ready for birds?
Everybody ready for birds?
Okay,
Anybody
I'm-
not ready for birds?
I'm going to talk.
All right, I think you're ready.
I am talking through a visualization on the birds, okay? So you're gonna get white on your paintbrush. Well, just watch me first, okay? I want you to think in your mind of the McDonald's M. Okay, you got that in your mind? Now you're going to take the edges of the M and you're going, the legs on the bottom, and you're going to pull them apart. You got that in your mind? So your picture in your mind should look something like this. Okay? You had an M, McDonald M, you pulled the legs out like this, and that's what you're going to paint for your bird. So when you paint the bird, I like to hold my paintbrush straight up and down, but you are adding one little diagonal up, a little V, another diagonal up to finish that V, and end with an end by lifting your paintbrush. Okay, so it's kind of like you start with a light pressure, start with light pressure, harder pressure up, light pressure out. Which will make, I mean, the difference in this wing and this wing makes it look like the bird is turning. And once you have your white bird, we don't have black. We have burnt umber as our darkest color. So you can take the burnt umber, and for a seagull, you're going to add a little dark on the end of each wing. You make some of them smaller, look like they're farther away. Okay, so that's the little seagulls, and you can add however many you would like to up here in your sky.
Yeah, you can't really see on that one.
Let's see. Interesting. Well, I got my camera showing the finished painting, so it's not working right now. Okay, if you had painted the edges of your painting, your last thing then is to take and pull the tape off, which will automatically give you aha moment because it will give you the idea that the painting is framed or matted.
And if you haven't yet, make sure you sign it or initial it. Own your work.
When did you want it? Do you still spray them?
Yes, I do have it. So anybody who's here, if you want me to seal your painting, I have acrylic, like matte acrylic sealant here. If you would like for me to seal it, or anybody who is doing it at home who's local, you're welcome to drop your painting off at the desk upstairs at the library, and I will seal them. So the sealant helps to keep them water fast and also keeps them from fading. So if you put it on your wall somewhere where it gets sun, then it will help keep the acrylic from fading over time. So I'm happy to seal them, and then you can come back and get them next week.